Hi there, my name is Brandon Bernard, and I am doing my speech on Luigi Pirandello for Dr. Fuller's class. So, I would like to start talking about Luigi Pirandello's life. So, Luigi Pirandello, who was the first son of Stefano and Caterina Ricci Gramado, was born on June 28, 1867. He was born in Girgenti, Sicily, and his father was a very wealthy businessman who was involved in sulfur mining. Between 1880 and 1887, which was during his teen years, his family moved temporarily to Palermo, the largest city on the island of Sicily. Luigi enrolled in Classic Lyceum, a type of educational institution, and then enrolled into a university. He later transferred to the University of Rome, and then to the University of Bonn in Germany. In 1889, he published his first book, a volume of poetry called Mal Giocondo, which translates to Joyful 3. In 1891, he received his doctorate with thesis in linguistics on the dialect of Girgenti and continues to publish poetry. Continuing on into 1894, he was living in Rome, and Pirandello takes part in the capital's tradition of intellectual circles collaborating in literary journals and befriending key cultural figures such as Luigi Capuana, theoretician of Verismo. In the same year, he also marries Maria Antonietta Portulano, the daughter of Stefano Pirandello's business partner. They end up having 3 children together, and he publishes his first collection of short stories. In 1897, he then accepts a teaching position in the Italian literature area and stylistics at the Istituto Superiore di Magistero, a women's teaching college. He then resigns from there not later until 1922. Between the years of 1901 and 1912, he turns his focus on writing fiction. He publishes half a dozen volumes of short stories and 5 novels, one including The Late Mattia Pascal, which was published in 1904. In 1903, Pirandello hits a time of bankruptcy. Pirandello experiences major economic setbacks, and his wife suffers a severe breakdown. When his father's sulfur mine flooded, he lost his income from his home, causing him to have to rely upon his writing for income, as well as getting more involved with tutoring for extra money. 3 years later, Pirandello joins the prestigious publishing house Treves. In 1908, he published a literary essay on humor. It is the start of polemic rapport with critic philosopher Benedetto Croce. 1910 begins the theatrical collaboration between Pirandello and producer Nino Martoglio, who stages 2 one-act plays, The Vice and Sicilian Limes. 5 years later, Pirandello composes his first Sicilian play for Impresario Angelo Musco. Several dialect productions follow this play, and his son also enlists in World War I this year. After his son enlists, Pirandello's wife's illnesses worsen. Between 1916 and 17, this year premieres the famous plays Leola Right You Are, If You Think So, and The Pleasure of Honesty, and then Pirandello is the modest successor in the Italian theater world. Just a year later, the first edition of Masked Nude, a theater anthology translating to Naked Masks, makes its first appearance. In 1919, his wife, Antonietta Portulano Pirandello, is confined to a nursing home where she dies 4 decades later. 1921 marks the premiere of 6 characters in Search of an Author, which is Pirandello's recognized masterpiece. It was also exposed in 1922 and 23 by successful runs in London, New York, and Paris. In 1922, the premiere of Henry IV happens. In 1922, the premiere of Henry IV happens. Adriano Tiglier publishes the seminal study of theater, forming a basis of serious Pirandello criticism. The first edition of Novelle per an anno, translating to Short Stories for a Year, which is a collection of Pirandello's short fictions, is offered by his new publisher, Ben Porad, in 1922 as well. A year later, the Pitti production of 6 characters makes Pirandello an international celebrity. Pirandello begins feverish activity in theater. During 1924, he begins to adhere to fascism with the public declaration during the Matteotti affair. Between 1925 and 28, he assumes the position of artistic director of a newly formed repertory company called Teatro d'Arte di Roma. He undertakes a new role as director, and he also hires Marta Abba as the company's leading lady, and she will become his closest confidant. In 1926, he publishes his last novel, One, No One, and 100,000. After that, he writes ceaselessly for theater and also commences constant international travel, residing primarily in Berlin or Paris from 1928 to 1933. He then had his first play of myth trilogy, The New Colony, which was staged in 1928. In 1929, he is named the Italian Academy by Benito Mussolini, effectively becoming a member of cultural establishment. He then was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature on November 9, 1934. 2 years after winning the Nobel Prize, he dies suddenly on December 10, 1936, after having pneumonia. Unfinished, his last play, The Mountain Giants, The Myth of Art, was posthumously staged in June 1937. 20 years after his death, between 1956 and 1960, Mondadori Publishers issue his complete works in 6 volumes. Continuing on to talk about Luigi's works, most of his works were short stories, and he wrote over 230 of them, though he began his career writing poetry. He also wrote at least 6 novels, as well as over 35 plays and 3 nonfiction works. All of his works were written in the native tongue of Italian. Many of his more important works, such as 6 Characters in Search of an Author, have been translated and in some cases performed in English. Considered scandalous when first performed in Rome, it was a huge success in Paris and in the United States. The performances began to receive much better receptions in his native Italy. George Bernard Shaw called the 6 Characters in Search of an Author the most original play ever. He created 14 volumes of his short stories, called Short Stories of a Year. They contained over 200 of his works, and there was no logical grouping to the stories. The themes were all different, and they were not in chronological order either, which was very much a function of his work. His stories documented the different types of people and the situations they encountered. He was very much a character in his own works. For example, in 6 Characters in Search of an Author, the characters are rehearsing another of Pirandello's plays. A number of his works deal with the question of who am I and what is real. 6 Characters in Search for an Author is an examination of both of these. In one case, he even refers to himself as Mattia Pascal, who happens to be the lead role as the anti-hero in one of his works. A consistent theme in his works was his dry, sometimes biting humor. Because all of his works are in Italian, there are occasions where the translations don't work. Phrases sometimes didn't have an equivalent in English. He would use words and dialect that were very idiomatic to his background, but were not very commonly used. His wife, whose dowry was also invested in the mine, suffered a nervous breakdown, causing significant issues with their marriage. Among other issues, she accused him of incest with his daughter. Oddly enough, a similar theme was played out in 6 Characters in Search of an Author. She was institutionalized in 1919 and died in 1959. His 2 sons were also captured as prisoners of war in World War I, which caused her to be a little bit more over the edge. He then became romantically involved with an actress, Marta Abba. She became a leading lady in his own acting troupe, which had been talked about when talking about his earlier life. Luigi was an accomplished author who channeled himself and the humankind in his work. He was recognized for his work by winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, and Pirandello was also able to achieve critical and commercial success in his writing. That is my presentation on Luigi Pirandello.